All this fancy ass bullshit that I see on YouTube, I don't have time for that. I work full time and I don't get paid enough to eat out every day. And when I do eat out, they always give me a piss poor serving size of shit food packed with cheap calories. So here's my channel. I cook things that are easy, cheap, bold, and healthier than what you can find outside. My name is Chi, and I'm a bad chef. You know what? I'm actually quite aware that all my past episodes have been a bit meaty. So to all my vegetarian friends, this one's for you. I don't know what it is, but Western palates seem to have this apprehension about tofu. I don't know. I've never really understood the apprehension against tofu. I quite like it. There's different tastes, different textures. There's even a dessert-style tofu here if you want to try that one. That was quite nice. I've tried it before. It's also a bit less deathy than meat. So there's that. Honestly, if you don't like tofu, you're probably just not cooking it with the right things. So today what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you a way to pack as much flavor into it as possible. This is my favorite way to cook tofu. So what we're going to do today is to make a fully vego Chinese-style braised tofu. In Cantonese, this is called Hoong Siew, and that directly translates to red roasted tofu. I suppose the name's a little bit misleading because the dish is neither red nor roasted. I think it refers to the traditional way of making this when they heat up wok until it's fucking red hot, right? And then they blast the tofu in hot oil until it looks roasted. I don't know. I don't actually know. Correct me if I'm wrong. But let's just go with that for now to keep the show ticking along. Now, I love this dish so much because it's pretty much a vegetarian staple inside any of these low-end Chinese restaurants around Sydney. When my parents used to take my sister and I out eating, we used to pretty much always order this. So it really holds a special place in my heart. It's a real comfort food for me, this one. Now, in this episode, I'm going to run through everything in a little bit more depth because there's a few new ingredients, a few new bits and bobs here and there, but everything has its purpose. So if you want to take those ideas, those concepts, and transfer them across to other recipes, be my guest. You're more than welcome to. First thing that we want to look at is the tofu. Tofu's bloody great. It's a soybean derivative that's high in protein and low in fat, and it works really well as a vector for flavor that you just want to punch across. The one that you want is a regular firm tofu that you should be able to find in Woolworths or Coles, but if you can't find that, go to an Asian mart. It runs for about $4 for a box of 12. You want the regular firm one because that holds together the best when you're cooking it, and it still remains soft and tender on the inside without falling apart. So regular firm. So to prep the tofu, what you want to do is to cut open the pack, empty out all the water, then sit the tofu in like a colander or a plate with some paper towels underneath. The reason why we want to do that is for two things. First, it draws out some of the water so it doesn't knacker the oil that we're trying to fry it in. And the second is that you allow the tofu to come up to temperature so it doesn't cool off the oil and it doesn't allow the oil to boil your tofu instead of fry it. So because I don't have that much time, here's one that I prepped earlier. This one I'm gonna bung back into the fridge. For the rest of the vegetables, honestly, there's no real wrong answer to this, but the combo that I like the best is carrots, baby bok choy, and shiitake mushrooms. If you're a vegetarian or a vegan, you absolutely must have shiitake mushrooms in your pantry at all times. You should be able to find them in an Asian mart for about $15 to $17 for a kilo, and they come dry, so they last forever inside your pantry. They're healthy as hell, they're packed full of so much flavor that you'll spend a couple of days in a listless delirium wondering what you ever did before discovering shiitake mushrooms. So get on these immediately. Naturally being dried, you'll have to soak them in water to rehydrate them. So I recommend putting them in cold water overnight so the flavor gets really deep. But if you forget because of your reliability, just 30 minutes soaked in boiling water would be fine. When the mushrooms are done soaking, cut off the stems with some kitchen shears. The stems are a bit woody and not as fun to eat as the caps. Remember not to throw out the shiitake water as well, because that's going to be our stock. We'll also need ginger, garlic, and spring onion, and all of that will be fried in a splash of Shaoxing wine. This is Shaoxing wine. It's a Chinese cooking wine that you should be able to find at Woolworths for about $1.20 a bottle. It tastes kind of like a salty cooking sherry, so it pairs really well with fucking umami, and it gives anything that you're cooking with a sort of zappy edge to it. So it'll make all our vegetables that we're working with today taste even deeper.
Next is the sauce, which is where all the flavor takes place.
So today we're working with two types of soy sauce. So the first type is a light soy sauce, right? In Cantonese, that's called sang tao. It's lighter, it's sweeter, it's slightly thinner than regular soy sauce. And on this side, we have something called lo tao. It's dark soy sauce. And this is thick and heavy and bold and makes things taste more brown. So this sort of soy sauce is great for marinating things like honey soy. That's gonna be this one. So if you wanna make chicken wings or pork ribs, use some of this. But it's also really intense and it stains like crazy, so use it sparingly. We're also going to be using oyster sauce today, which is one of my favorites. It's like the AK-47 of adding instant flavor in the shape of a brown sauce. You can use it in anything like curries, stews, other sauces, and it'll immediately taste fuller and more complex. It's also the only thing inside our dish today that isn't completely vegan. So if you want to make it vegan, use something like this, vegetarian oyster sauce. Boop. Now, these three sauces, along with our mushroom water, are all going to contribute to the bottom end, the basey end of that taste spectrum. And why they're so good at doing that is because they're packed full of this naturally occurring substance called glutamate, which is the G in MSG. Just to clear up a fallacy, glutamate is a naturally occurring compound that you can find in a lot of meats, vegetables, and cheeses. But the cheapest way to produce it in the food industry is to attach it to a simple and abundant salt, like sodium, which is 1/2 a table salt, which is also safe and tasty to eat. So there's nothing wrong with MSG, it's just like regular salt with the Dom fetish. The only reason why MSG has been demonized so much is because some white guy from Massachusetts in 1968 couldn't handle eating things with flavor in it. So he decided to orchestrate an entire smear campaign against it. So ignore that crock of shit and just cook with whatever you want.
Speaking of cooking, let's get into it. First, it's best to get the rice chuffing away.
Look, if you have a rice cooker, use that. But if you live in a shoebox of an apartment that doesn't have enough space to store any appliances, and you can't justify spending $100 on an appliance that cooks exclusively carbs, there's nothing wrong with using a pot.
First, wash off the starch from the rice using cold or warm water. When that's done, drain it, then add some clean water. For jasmine rice, that's about 3 cups of water for every 2 cups of rice. Bring it to the boil, reduce the heat to the lowest setting on the smallest hob, and then cover and simmer for 15 minutes. Then, turn off the stove and let it incubate for a further 10 minutes. And that's pretty much the rice done. It'll stay hot for a while, so it's worth multitasking and cooking the other things while you do the rice. For the tofu, we're pretty much going to be shallow frying them today. Use about 1/2 inch or 2 cups of neutral oil, heat it up to around 180 degrees C, or until a piece of your tofu bubbles enthusiastically when placed into it. Fry your tofu for about 8 to 15 minutes, or until the outside is a deep and crispy color. I do this in batches. Because we're not using a shitload of oil, the bigger your batch is, the more the oil cools off. You want the heat to stay pumping in order to keep your tofu crispy. When the tofu is done, remove the tofu to drain. Now for the sauce. It's made from 1 cup of mushroom water, a few dabs of oyster sauce, a lash of light soy sauce, a teaspoon of dark soy sauce, a lick of sesame oil, a strong sprinkle of sugar, and a pinch of salt. We'll add the sauce into the main dish a little bit later on. For the vegetables, slice some ginger and roughly chop some garlic. The bok choy you could just peel apart and give it a bit of a wash. The mushrooms you could leave whole for the mouthfeel, or you can cut them into strips, it doesn't really matter too much. And the carrots will cook the best if you slice them into thin coins. Now, heat up some of the frying oil in another pan on high heat. Fry the ginger and garlic for about 30 seconds until the flavor releases into the oil, and when that's done, chuck in the mushrooms and the carrots. Once that gains a little temperature, splash in a little bit of the Shaoxing wine. You want the alcohol to evaporate, so heat it until the steam smells unalcoholic. Once it's up to temperature, dump in the sauce mixture. Work it around a bit until it's up to temperature again, then it's time to thicken it. A fair amount of Chinese cooking uses cornstarch as a thickener. All you have to do is to start 1 tablespoon of cornstarch with the same amount of water. Mix it thoroughly, then pour the mix into the pan bit by bit while stirring until you reach your desired thickness. In the final stage, add the bok choy, cover in the sauce, bring it up to temperature, then reintroduce the tofu. Give it a bit of a mix, then it's pretty much done. With regards to the plating, traditionally this is served in a heated clay pot, but I don't have one of those, so I'm just going to dump it into a bowl and wolf it down instead.
So, what does it taste like? It tastes like if Buddha and Aang the Last Airbender had a bastard love child together and that child came up to you and punched you in the face with a fistful of flavour. Oh yes. Honestly, you would not believe how much flavour is crammed into this little bowl. I mean, you've got the sauce mixing in with hot steamy rice as well. And then you've got each of the vegetables providing their own sweetness to the dish and their own textural components as well. But the standout, the tofu. Oh my lord, the tofu. It's just that when you bite into it, there's a little bit of resistance and then your teeth just glide right through it. It's pretty healthy actually. I mean, of course we deep fry the tofu, but that's pretty much the unhealthiest part of it. So if you want to avoid that, you can either air fry it or pan fry it. Honestly, anything really goes. But I chose to deep fry it because that's what the restaurants do and I wanted to be true to form. And do I regret it? Absolutely not. It's 100% worth the extra calories. In terms of cost, well, the tofu was $4, the bok choy was about $2.50, the mushrooms I used about $2.50's worth, and the rest of the stuff added up to be like $1, $2. So the whole thing was like $10 or $11 for easily 3 to 5 servings. So at its cheapest, that $2 a bowl, and as the most expensive if you're a fat boy like me, about $4 a bowl. And even then, that's cheaper than a servo meat pie. And which one would you prefer? The sad, limp, soggy mess from a microwave? Or this? Granted, there's a bunch of sauces you might have to initially invest in, but they've got such a long shelf life they'll last pretty much forever, and they're so versatile that I guarantee you, you'll use them in other dishes as well. And if you don't know how to use them, let me show you how in a few new videos. But for now, I'm gonna stuff my face. This is Hoong Siew Tofu, or in other words, braised tofu in shiitake mushroom sauce. Now get out of here, got things to eat. Cut to the outro.
Put that bitch's boy out here in the field, oh yeah. I'm already in, yeah. Come outside looking like a snack. Hurry up, get in, hell yeah.